Hi, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope,
Living Faith. Well, welcome back to Growing Hope, Living Faith. So we are so glad that you guys are listening in, and we didn't get to record last week.
That's right.
So that was the first week that we haven't recorded since we started.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
I know.
We've been doing this for a month.
Yeah, there are some weeks that, like, if we know that there's going to be something coming up, that next week we'll record two to cover that next week. So it's not that we necessarily record every week, but we always put out a new episode. And so last week was just kind of an anomaly. It was just an outlier. We were planning to record, and my mom went in for a procedure. You guys probably saw when we put out our message that there was something that happened in my family. My mom went in for a routine procedure. It became anything but routine.
Wow, yeah.
Which essentially, she's doing great now. So, she's home and she's doing well. But that kind of pushed our recording schedule out just a little bit. And then by the time, it just really didn't work out. And so we're sorry that we didn't get a new episode out last week, but we are excited to continue on with spiritual formation. And we're going to be looking at that here in a little bit. Pastor Rhonda, we had an experience this last weekend, and I don't know, for those who have never watched a movie with Pastor Rhonda, it is an experience.
Listen, I did really well for like the first hour, and then I couldn't hold back anymore. I am not easily entertained at all. So, yeah, the movie that they had me to, waste my time on.
No, it was not a waste of time. We thought, that she would love this movie. I thought it was like a knockout, going to be a home run. And boy, it wasn't not.
Well, the storyline was good, but what I just can't handle is how every conversation was like singing, like, how are you today? And it was so predictable. It would get quiet, and there's the guy that's, been in a fire and he's hurt. And then she sits down in his bed and I'm like, here it comes. I am so sorry you got hurt. And then this one girl, she was mad at her boyfriend, her husband. And I was like, here she goes. She's going to break out like, I am still so mad at you.
So we watched, in case you can't pick up on what we watched The Greatest Showman together, and it's one of my favorite movies, and she's just like dogging it over there while we're watching it.
I know. I wanted to open the podcast today going, welcome back to Growing Hope, Living Faith.
Oh man, it was just like, during the whole movie, it was just like the first hour was good, you're right, she wasn't really saying a whole lot, and
I was holding back.
And then she got to this one scene and she was like, that just would never happen, that people are in a place of whatever. Well, they were in a bar, I guess we could say that. They're in a bar and they just break out into songs. She said, that would never happen. That's not real. I can't get into movies that aren't real.
That's not going to happen. You're not going to jump up on top of the bar and just break out in song. Really? I just don't have much of an imagination.
And so then we started talking about your favorite movies. And what is your favorite movie?
What did I say? Like
Top Gun.
Well,
because Top Gun is just
at least they
so
don't say,
believable.
Let's go fly a plane.
Oh man, that was so good. So I'm glad we had that experience together, and we're going to show you a lot more movies, because I'm just I'm interested to see how that goes now, and try to bring you into, I guess, maybe the 20th century, with movies. Never seen The Sound of Music, never seen any of those kind of movies.
No, I haven't. I'm all about the popcorn.
Yes.
It's about the popcorn. It's not about the movie.
And the naps.
Yeah, I always fall asleep.
Yeah,
I'm just not easily entertained.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
I'm a realist. Remember my brownies? You stick your hand in the batter, 50 strokes.
Yes.
I'm just a very realistic person.
Man, it was so funny, and it just kind of blew me away. And I was like, man, this is going to be a surefire win, because the music is so good. And it's like, and you were just like, nah, this isn't.
I would have liked the music if I was just listening to it.
Right.
But every conversation, we just don't do that in real life. We just don't.
Oh man, that's
So
so
when
awesome.
I got home, like we left and it was coming a really bad storm.
Yeah,
So
that
did
storm's
Morgan
coming
tell
in.
you about the text I sent to her?
No.
I sent her a little text that had musical notes and it said,
Nice.
we made it home, musical note before the down, musical note pour. And everything was
awesome.
on music.
That's so awesome. So, well, we'll have that to laugh about for forever now. So it's awesome.
Making memories.
Yeah. So, we did say, I think probably in the last podcast that we were going to continue on kind of with incarnate living, but as we've been looking and just kind of exploring some different things, we're going to transition to some other disciplines. And
there are so many ways to connect with God. And, there's just so many ways. And we talked about the Bible reading. Mm-hmm. Can I tell this story real quick? So last night for my class, I had to teach on Lectio Divina Bible reading. Mm-hmm. Well, I could do any of the disciplines, but I picked that one. And of course, we're being serious and it has to be quiet. Well, then there's this train in the background. And I was like, oh, great. So then we get to the very end and people are starting to open up and share. And all of a sudden, this wasp, I have this fear of wasp, but this wasp comes and one of the other ladies no, she screams and nearly knocks this girl out of her chair. So I leaned right into the camera and I was like, this is over. We've got a wasp in the room. So I had to explain to my teacher, to my professor about the wasp. But yeah. So anyway, I said all that to say there are so many ways to connect with God.
That's awesome.
And one discipline that I found very interesting last week was the practice of celebration. Do you practice celebrating?
That's good. I'm trying to think through. I think a lot of people would equate maybe Sundays to celebrations, but I think when it comes down to the personal level, I don't know.
Right. We learned about how, I know for my practice, because you can celebrate people in your life. And with having 5 grandbabies, it's hard to celebrate each one like there's nobody else. You know, it's we usually have to take 2 at a time, But I had Lorelai. She is the next to the last. And I realized I've never just taken her and celebrated just her, just me and her. And so I did that and it was wonderful. We went to Chick-fil-A and, we just had this one-on-one time and basically I shoved everything off of my calendar. Right. No one in the world mattered but Lorelai. Right. And that's really the same concept of we push everything aside and there's no one else but Jesus and we just celebrate him. And one thing that I learned last week was that I think we miss how joyful God is. Yep. And I used to have a Bible study teacher that would say, Jesus is really in a good mood, because I think we see this stern, he's a righteous, holy judge, and he's coming to just, pour out his wrath on everybody that doesn't measure up. Right. And we forget that in his presence is fullness of joy. And it seemed like every time I opened up the Bible last week, everlasting joy or this crown of joy on my, our heads. And I saw that everywhere. And I started thinking about everlasting joy, how wonderful it's going to be when there comes a time that our joy is not short-lived. Because you know how it is. We can be full of joy and then in an instant we can be gone, because life is just that way. But can you imagine a time of just pure bliss, joy without interruption? That's our promise. And we can find joy in the midst of everything else. But, I think sometimes we think all of our songs should be so serious. And, he is serious. We do have to, be in awe of him. But there's just something to be said to just celebrate, of who we are in him because of what he's done and just have that spirit of celebration. So I did challenge our people. I don't think I did a very good job Sunday trying to explain all of that. Right. But in our worship services, I think sometimes we just miss this whole element of just being joyful, singing a joyful song to the Lord. It's good.
And I think I've mentioned this before, but we are oftentimes so short. We have a short-term memory loss, I think, as followers. And so I think there really is something to this mentality that we celebrate, and we just even celebrate Jesus, like I said, and who he is. And, we see it really all through the Old Testament. There was so many times when something would happen, that God would move, that God would work, what would they do? They would build an altar.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? True. And like, there's this, and it wasn't that they were just trying to celebrate the reality of what God had done. It's creating those remembrances of what God has done in your life and how he has moved and how he has worked. And so like, as we, once again, I think we just celebrate the reality of who Jesus is, and that alone can be celebration. But there's also this, I think, remembrance that celebration maybe calls us back to, that as we are going through life, if we don't celebrate Jesus and his goodness in our lives, then when we're going through the hard times in life, we forget, right, how good and how faithful he is, and the fact that he does journey with us and he's with us. Now, does that mean that everything's going to turn and everything's going to be exactly how we want it to be? No, but there is something to this celebration that as we apply this to our life, to our faith, to our walk, man, as we are going through really, really hard times, there's something to this celebration that helps us when we are going through those really, really hard times, because we do live we do have those hopes and those promises of joy and peace and a lot of those things, and those are things that we really should celebrate on a very, very deep level. And at the core, that's the reality of the God that we serve and his desires and his things that he desires to give us. So.
Right. And really, celebration really goes hand in hand with this next practice. Yeah. And that's gratitude. You know, and wow, I mean, it's so easy to not be grateful for things that we think, you know, they've held us back or limited us or hurt us and those things. But, you know, I've really had to spend a lot of time last week with celebration and gratitude and think, well, why am I not thankful for this? And it's because, well, it hurts, you know, but at the same time, I think we have to just develop a trust that we believe in the goodness of God so much that no matter what it is that I'm going through, somehow, some way, eventually it's going to be worked out for my good, you know, and for his glory. And man, it takes a lot of faith to believe that. Yeah. But with that in mind, we can be grateful. Yeah. And good. Yeah, and Thanksgiving is just, I mean, that's part of worship, it's part of celebration, it's part of all of it. But how can we practice it? Yeah. How can we stay mindful of gratitude? For sure,
yeah. And I think it goes along that front. And I think it also goes along the front of being content in life. Yeah, you know, like I think so many times just being thankful for the things we have is really, really hard sometimes because, like I said, the world is not grateful. You know, we live in a very, I think, ungrateful world. We're living in a world that is always pushing for more. They're always, and they're grabbing for more possession, more wealth. There's greed that's associated with a lot of those things. And so, like, as we practice this gratitude, that even as we are practicing gratitude for the situations and things that happen in life, I believe that'll begin to spill over to our kingdom living, that we will be have gratitude just for kind of where we are at, and we'll be content with where we're at. Because I think a lot of kingdom living, it begins, if we really want to live the kingdom, we have to be content in life with where we are at and where God has us right now. And that's not always easy. It's not. And like I said, we can't become a part of that rat race of trying to get more and trying to get more and trying to get more and to be like the Joneses or whatever you want to say. You know, like we've got to get... And I think that that's the place that gratitude hopefully leads us, that as we are applying this to our lives and we have this gratitude for the situations and circumstances we go in life, man, my hope and prayer is that begins to spill over into just our everyday living, that we can be content in how we go about living life.
And that contentment, again, is just trusting. You know, I think about Paul, whatever state I'm in, you know, and he went through these dreadful things, you know, and, you know, in all things, you know, he knew that he had strength because he was content whether things were great or things were not so great. Yeah. And this is coming from a guy in prison, you know.
With God, all things are possible, and that is that contentment that he has.
Right. So gratitude. So how do we practice that? I mean, how do we do that on a daily basis? And my spiritual, what do you call this? I got to look at the title of it. The Spiritual Disciplines Handbook by Adele Calhoun. It is so good. This is my book that I have to turn back in, but I just bought it. You can get this on Amazon for your Kindle, or you can buy it. But it's such a good book because it has practical things that you can do. But the first thing here, it says to begin a gratitude journal by keeping a record of the abundances God has given you. And then it says next to each abundance, write what it means to you to have a God who interacts and intervenes in your life. I thought that was good. Mm-hmm. And another thing is end every day by saying thank you to God for at least one thing. Tell them, I can't talk today. Mm-hmm. Then tell God what the one thing meant for you. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that's important, even with our kids. Mm-hmm. I know when my kids were little, I used to just for conversation starters, I would just say, what was the best thing that happened today? And what was the worst thing, you know? And I knew at nighttime when the light was off in the room before, you know, we said our last prayers and went to sleep, that was, you know, a time that they could open up. But, you know, we really have to teach our kids to be grateful because this idea of entitlement is just kind of like how we are, you know, that's kind of the condition we are as just human beings. But we can teach our kids what is one thing that you're thankful for today. And I thought that was good. This is another one, and I thought this was pretty cool. Write a letter of thanks to someone who has touched your life in the past year, the past month, or the past week. And boy, that's a lost art, isn't it? Yeah. You know, not many of us will sit down and write letters, but even a text message. I really can't talk today. Text message to someone to say, man, I appreciate you, and I want to tell you thank you. I want to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to practice this. So I really try to do that this past week. Like I said, celebration and just being mindful of all the things that I'm thankful for. God has blessed us so many ways, you know, with his grace and man, the things that he's pulled me out of, and I'm so grateful.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about this is we truly can't show gratitude to God if our prayer life is not where it needs to be. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, so a lot of these disciplines, they're so interconnected on a deep level that, you know, you can't do this, like I said, if you're not in communication with God, if you're not listening to God, but then you're also not talking to God. Right. You know, if you can't really do this, I think if you don't have... if you're not reading like scripture to see how God interacts, who is this God? What is this God all about? So, you know, I think it's very important for us to have that realization that, we're talking about a lot of different things, but there is definitely some interwovenness to bring us to a place, where we are being spiritually formed, right? And we are relinquishing that human way of life, the carnal self, and we are putting on you know, that image of Christ, and that's what the spiritual formations are all about. That's the desire, is taking away that carnal nature, totally emptying ourselves and putting more and more of him. It's less of me, more of him. And all of these practices are hopefully pushing us to that place where we are emptying ourselves and putting on more and more of him.
Right, and opening ourselves up to him.
Right.
And it does take practice. And I've said this last night, if you were to throw some apple seeds into the ground today, don't wake up tomorrow expecting to have a full-grown apple tree producing apples. Right. It's not going to happen. You know, it takes sunlight, it takes time, it takes water, it takes it all, you know. And it's the same way. So today we start the journal, and we'll notice if we're consistent with that, in a year from now, we'll notice how much more grateful we are.
Yeah, and that'll spill over into, like I said, all aspects of our life.
Right. And all of this, like you said, all of these disciplines are just so interconnected. But it just bleeds over into worship. Yeah, it does. You know, and I think sometimes we don't understand. And I've been a worship leader, worship pastor for 15 years. I've been doing this. And I still don't understand worship. You know,
are we talking corporate worship? Is that kind of what we're hitting on, or
like both? Because worship is such a broad word. It is so big, because there is this idea of corporate worship where we come together and we express our gratitude, where we express our thanksgiving, and where we just stand in awe of who God is and what he's done, and we do that together, and it's powerful. We need to do that together. But then there's also this this whole element of my whole life is worship. You know, it's like everything I do points back, because we're going to worship somebody or something. We're made to do that. We are made to honor somebody or something. And so, I mean, worship is our giving, it's our living Jesus in the world. I mean, it's all of it. But worship, as far as like corporate worship, it's just this time of, setting aside to say together, we're going to make these declarations as to who we believe God is, and that's why we say the creeds, and that's why we sing songs that are declarative, that we are expressing, I believe that you are the one true God. I believe, the things that we believe in. And then worship, again, is giving, and it's prayer. I mean, it's all of those things. Right. It's a response.
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe that corporate worship obviously is important. I think it's vital to our faith. I think it's the call that God puts on us is to, to gather together. And we've said it every time we've been talking about spiritual formation, that there is this reality to kingdom living that we can't do it on our own. We can't do it on our own. And so, corporate worship does lead us to that place. I am kind of a firm believer that corporate worship oftentimes reflects our worship that we have through the week.
Right.
And if we're not worshiping well, just in our everyday life, in and out of our everyday life, lots of times we'll come together, and sometimes you can push it, you can force it, or whatever. But it'll reflect in our corporate worship, how we go about worshiping and living on our everyday life. And so, I think corporate worship is an opportunity where we come together as a community, and we say, thank you, God, for being with us this last week. We wouldn't have made it through this last week without you. And we love you. We give you praise. And God, fill us up, because if we're going to make it through this next week, we need you. You're going to have to be present for us to be able to do it. And then hopefully it encourages us, and it challenges us, and it pushes us to journey through life together, to realize once again that we're not alone. And that's, like I said, everything we do, like you said, it's worship. It's worship for something, whether it's going to be for God and his desires and his will for our life, to be able to be content with where we're at, and not that desire and push. That's the thing that drives us is not that we're going to get more, or more power, or more whatever. But man, what is the thing that begins to push us? And the things that push us begin to dictate how we live out our life on a deep level.
Right. And it's so easy to get off track. I can remember years and years ago when I was just growing in leaps and bounds in Christ. I was pretty much a new believer, but I was just growing. I was reading scripture, and my husband bought a keyboard for me, the one that I still have. It's so old. But he bought that for me, and I can remember putting my kids in bed, and Eric would go to work at night, and I would slip downstairs to the basement of our house, and I would just sit on my keyboard, and I can remember just playing from my heart, just hymns, or songs that I knew, and I would just sing to Jesus. There was no audience, there was no microphone, there was nothing, and I would just get so lost in worship, and it was such a sweet time where I felt his presence. And I kind of wonder if that's why he pulled me out of that basement and has me, do that, because, those days formed me, and I miss doing that. And the Lord convicted me, you need to get back to that keyboard where nobody's listening but me, and just sing to me, like nobody, because when you're leading worship, it is hard because you feel like, I feel like I'm trying to evaluate the situation. I'm trying to look at the whole room. I'm trying to see if there are any distractions out, are the words correct, or what's going on. And I feel like I'm constantly like gauging everything. And it's easy to lose that spirit of worship when you feel like you're trying to, are we all in the right key? Are we all on the same page? Or that, you try to eliminate all those distractions. And the Lord reminded me, I just want to hear you sing to me, Rhonda. I just want you to just sit at the keyboard and sing to me.
Yeah, it's good. Worship is an offering, right? Just kind of going back to the old, I guess, language in the Old Testament maybe, but it's this, should be this thing that we hope is pleasing to God, right? And so, it's an offering. It's what we are giving kind of back to God. And then, like I said, Scripture just talks about that mentality that everything we do in life, it's a worship. It's a part of worship. Yeah. And I think, there definitely is this, music is a powerful thing.
Right.
You know, we often think of worship and we think of worship time in a service and we think of the music time. But that's why, like, you know, lots of times my week will go better if I am intentional about even just listening to Christian radio or other stuff. Like, there is power in this music that allows us to be able to continue to, I guess, just be more, for it to be on the forefront of our mind, right? Like, if we have songs in our heads that are pushing us and challenging us or shaping us, you know, then I think that begins to really help us live out each and every day. And I think that's why, like, you know, you go to the Old Testament, I mean, early on, I mean, for the Israelites and for the Hebrew people, they always had reminders everywhere,
Right.
that who their God was and who they belonged to. And when we just go through life and we don't have these reminders and these things in place, then living worship and being like every day becomes so much harder. You know, they had the flat trees on their heads and the tassels on their robes and the prayer robes, and like they would put stuff on their doorpost and they would put stuff on their fences. And so everywhere that they would go, they had this reminder about really what this is all about.
Right.
And that allowed them to be able to worship day in and day out on a much, much deeper level because they had these reminders everywhere they went. And so it was good.
Well, here's another practice.
Yeah.
And have you ever heard of this one, Visio? Is that how you say that? Visio or Visio Divina?
I haven't.
You ever heard of that?
No.
I had never heard of that either.
Yeah.
And it's basically the practice of like focusing on beauty, like, you know, beautiful things. And I think of the times that Eric and I love, like we go to a little town. We'll love to walk through the town and find like old churches and, you know, the stained glass. And I love the beauty of that. But just Christian art, you know, just art and just getting lost in that, or nature.
Creation.
Yeah. And so Sunday, after we got back from your house, we had this really big storm, and I was sitting in my chair and it just started looking weird outside. And it felt like, what's happening? You know, it's like it's growing pink out here. And sure enough, there was this huge rainbow.
That's awesome.
And I ran outside on our front yard and just gazed at it. I mean, it's just beautiful. It is just so beautiful. And I think so many times we just miss the beauty of creation and the stars and, I don't know, just creation in general.
Yep.
Just to make a practice of going out and looking.
Yep.
But also it can be, you know, a practice of, like I said, the stained glass and just beautiful things that, I mean, artists, have you seen worship? Like they'll paint pictures and stuff as worship, like music is happening.
So good. Yeah.
I love that. But yeah, we can open ourselves up to God when we practice looking at beautiful things. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes along definitely with Jesus. Jesus was always using the stuff around him to be able to connect to kingdomness, connect to God, connect to all those things. And there's all kinds of things and paintings and pictures that really are and can move us and give us understanding. Right. I think God desires to speak to us on such a deep level.
Yes,
and that's what this whole thing, once again, spiritual formation
that's
is God desires to speak to us. Why would we ever say that, no, God can't use that to speak to me? You know, I mean, there's been moments where, you know, I've been struggling and like, I'll look at a chair or something, you know, and it's like, there's something with, I don't, you know, like it would be like something will come up. Like, I think God is always desiring to speak and to move in our lives if we will just try to hone our ears in to truly be able to hear and to understand to the best of our ability what he may be trying to tell us. And that's what this spiritual formation stuff is all about. Like, if we want to become more and more and more like him and live kingdom, then we will be as disciplined as we can be to try to live out and do these formational things to allow God to speak to our hearts, to shape us, to mold us into the people that he desires for us to be. But it takes time, it takes energy, it takes sacrifice, it takes a willingness to really step outside of yourself to try to enter into that realm that where he can speak. And you're right, he will use I think he uses creation. I think and we miss it so many times. We miss it so many times because we're so focused on other things and that we think are important, but in the grand scheme, they're really not that important.
And the crazy thing, and we talked about this last night in the Bible study, but I think of spiritual formation and disciplines as the benefit to me. I'm going to grow spiritually. I'm going to become more like Christ, and I'm going to be stable and steady and those kind of things. But again, it's a relationship,
Right.
and it blows my mind to think that his end of it, he's just excited to be with us.
Yeah.
He finds joy. He delights in us spending time. He delights in us discovering more of him. And I just wondered, as I'm standing out of my front yard and it's lightning still, but I'm just looking up and I'm just thinking, how the heavens declare the glory of God. And I'm just having this moment in my front yard. And I just believe with all my heart that he was pleased with that. Like, look at my girl down there. She knows what I did this, It's, I don't want to make him unholy by saying that, but it's like he's this parent towards us.
Yep.
And, when my kids are grown to believe me when they call me and say, hey, look, you were right. Or, when my kids need me now, especially, it warms my heart. And I can only imagine how he felt knowing I'm standing there with my camera going, the glory of God. This is just a glimpse of his glory. You're beautiful. And I'm just doing this praise and worship out in my front yard. He was there. He was there with me.
Absolutely. And speaking. And the question is are we going to allow ourselves to be able to enter into a space that when those moments happen, we're going to allow God to speak, and we're going to pray that he'll give us the ears to be able to hear.
Right.
And that's what this is all about.
Right.
Man, if we could just move to a place where we really began to, just have those ears. If that could just be our prayers, God, give me the ears day in, day out, not just on Sundays, not just on Wednesdays. But God, I want to hear from you and be with you every day, day in and day out. Man, then maybe God will continue to reveal himself to you in a way that's just absolutely mind-blowing. And I think that's where we got to get. I think that's where we got to be. And
he'll meet you where you are.
That's it. 100%. He's
Just
faithful.
Be honest.
He's faithful, and he is good. Man, so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Such a great conversation. I don't know. We didn't even talk. Is this going to be our last one?
I don't know. I could have turned my book back in today, because I'm moving on to theology.
Oh, Theology 101.
Yeah.
But we don't know where we'll be next week, but we may find a couple more, and we may do some more, or we may be somewhere else. But man, we just want to encourage you and let you know this God's desire, once again, is to meet with you, but you just don't have to do it alone. There's people that find somebody that you can journey with. If journaling is not your thing, well, then find someone that's going to help hold you accountable, to journaling, somebody that you can be real with and be honest with. And, I think accountability really does go a long way, especially when it comes to a lot of these spiritual formations and disciplines. If we're going to be like Christ. And find somebody, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. We have a email. It's growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com.
We have Facebook. It's Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast. So reach out to us, send us a message or comment, and we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you got any ideas of something you would like to hear us talk about, and not that we're experts on necessarily anything, but But we would love to be able to have some suggestions or ideas too. So feel free to reach out to us on that. And man, such a fun conversation.
Yes, it is.
And I'll have to keep you updated on which movie is going to be nice for Pastor Rhonda as well. All right. Well, we do love you all. We do love you all. We pray and hope that you have a great rest of your week. Grace and peace. God bless. And bye-bye. Well, welcome back to Growing
Hi.
Growing Hope Living Faith. We're going to start that all over.